Hey guys, it is bright and early on June the 23rd, and it's so interesting. Every day is really a day of politics at Garula and Markets with May. Like there really isn't a lot of news flow happening right now. So all of this really from the trader's perspective, from Rich's show, which is immediately after this, is like fun times because there'll definitely be opportunities of swinging back and forth. But from an investor's perspective, and if you have a little bit longer time horizon, I actually think it's really day trading, probably fun, swing trading, probably not the most fun right now. And then long-term investing, that's kind of where more I'm going to bend towards. There's not a lot of great swing trades that I feel like very passionate about given how crazy this market's been. But I do want to just today show you a few things that I'm seeing. And then also on the headlines and just talk through how I'm thinking about it, remind the economic data that's coming out, and then just talk very briefly about some of the names that you just want to always kind of keep on your radar screen. Let's see. Oh, let me switch to, oh my goodness, why did I do it this way? Let me switch to the views here, past performance, not indicative of future returns, as we always like to say. Here we go. So the jobs report came out today, and it's what folks are attributing this liftoff in the early indices to. And we can take a look at that really quick, and you can see everything is kind of starting in the green. Oil is kind of flat, and it's so intriguing because the headlines would not indicate this should be anything but green. So it's kind of like you kind of know that there's some fun day trading to happen because this number corresponds with really wonderful profitability for all the companies in the space. And I think also metals and mining has gotten crushed. I want to show you one that I've kind of been exploring and will nibble on a bit, although you just got to watch the technicals on this. And that's why you should tune into Rich's show. But this one, Freeport-McMoRan, seems to be in a little bit of a free fall. The news flow on it doesn't really tell me anything as to why, other than people perceive this as a copper company, which is a huge component of its revenues. Don't get me wrong, with China closed down and all these other things, that's a real thing. But the fact is they also mine gold. So it can't be the case that gold, oh, it's down today, but honestly, gold has not been down most of this week. But gold can't be up and Freeport-McMoRan down. It doesn't make any sense. They're actually one of the largest gold miners around. And then you also have molybdenum as their major other mining thing. But like, I think people are just confused that GDP slowdown is necessarily 100% happening. And that is because of some of the headlines that are occurring. I do want to remind everyone that today, another thing that can happen to create some lift is the Fed chairman testifying again in front of the House. That will always happen again and again. As far as that goes, every time he has his FOMC meetings notes, then subsequently he has to speak before the Senate and the House. And it will most likely go like yesterday's meetings went. So not ideal sometimes when you're trying to interpret, because it's really just a lot of politicians giving you more their point of view, and Jerome Powell really teaching us all how to be very professional when we are hearing stuff that is just completely not okay. So to speak, in my opinion. Wow, I have such admiration for this character. Not a character, this person, let me say it that way. I'm very appreciative that he's in that seat with a cool head and a very thoughtful way of speaking clearly about what he's trying to do. All right. I want to go through some macro headlines and some very brief non-macro company specific headlines and just talk through them a bit. Today, it sounds like everyone is all abound related to some of the news in the airlines. I've heard that some cutbacks were announced on the number of flights that would happen at American and United. And for whatever reason, people are very upset about this, as if this is a negative and they shouldn't have taken money, because the cutbacks are actually, from what I understand, deriving from the lack of staffing as relates to pilots. And it's not coming from lack of demand. So I'm actually surprised at the way that it's being spun in the marketplace. Like some folks that are a little bit cooler heads and maybe not just pundits on the screen are saying, hey, you guys realize like they're all going to report very well, and we can't be upset with them because they did what set of business choices would have made sense in the COVID period, which is allowing people to retire early, et cetera. But they do have a very serious thing that they have to address. Many of them have opened schools, which they announced in the previous quarter to just get more pilots in the seats. In fairness, that actually bodes well for Berkshire Hathaway, because Berkshire Hathaway has one of the largest avionics, both the equipment, the actual videos that they train on when you're like going in and trying to get time on the video thing so that you can get you get your re-up certification, as well as in the training of new folks. But Berkshire's been kind of beaten up. I think at the 270 level, I am very carefully watching Berkshire and trying to like slowly become a little bit more in that company, because the one thing that everybody has to remember about Berkshire Hathaway is that Warren has plenty of cash. He went through it during his annual report. How much cash? The answer is a lot. Like, he's got the GDP of some countries' cash, and he has shown zero problem with buying back his stock when it's undervalued. And also, quite frankly, like, his shareholders don't really sell. Like, he has some trading shareholders, but largely speaking, he just keeps buying back his float. So there is that. So most of probably the selling pressure in something like Berkshire is coming from just indices, excuse me, that are just fluctuating with the markets. So realize that that is a company that, given that it throws off that much cash and the types of companies they're in, is probably fairly safe to try to find a spot. Now, I do think that all this macro news, the second and the third, are probably indicators that any buying that happens from now until basically companies start reporting earnings and we get a clearer picture of what's going on, and also since when GDP reports, any buying that you do for the long term, do it slowly. You will have a red day, but definitely somewhere in here, especially for companies that are completely bulletproof. Maybe I'm using that word wrong, but fairly bulletproof. Let me say it that way. You may not be able to get them at these prices and forever. I mean, these two line items are probably definitely something to be concerned about. So European leaders set to grant Ukraine candidate status as a member. It's not NATO, so it's EU, I think, is what I'm understanding. And that's great. I'm really excited as relates to that. But if we edge closer to the idea that they join NATO, I'm hoping that that resolves stuff. But the truth is, we won't know until we know if it resolves or antagonizes. It's just a very difficult situation. And then the other one is Germany, facing gas supply crisis, declares alarm level. So they keep escalating the fact that there actually is there's storage. The storage targets for the winter are at risk. In other words, basically, because Russia's dwindled down its deliveries, it's agreed that its current agreements, it's not trying to like rock the boat there as far as that goes, and it's got plenty of boat rocking that it's doing in other ways. But it just is what we've talked about, that they really have a conundrum overseas. Again, I think that the only way this gets resolved, even for the summer, it is for them to use coal. In other words, use coal, save a little bit for the winter, try to figure some things out, but at least buy themselves a little time, because you really don't want to have people freeze through the winter. It's not a great thing. Okay, on the company news, what I saw is this: Netflix confirmed partnership talks for ad-supported services. If this increases the price of the stock, this is just agreements on partnerships. This really does indicate that they had no plan. So when they reported the last quarter poorly, so this is not the greatest thing as far as that goes, because confirms partnership talks doesn't mean confirms strategy and what we're going to do next. So that's something to consider. Go ahead, Rich. What's up?
Yeah, so I was going to ask about Netflix. I'm glad you brought that up. I looked at the chart. I looked at a 5-year chart, and Netflix is back where it was almost 5 years ago in terms of price. So I'm thinking, it might be, from a long-term perspective, even from a trading perspective, buying leaps a good opportunity. So I'm really interested to know more about this.
Yeah, definitely do it slowly, but they do have some fairly big problems with their business model right now. I think what happened during COVID is obviously you had more users come in, but whereas the users but the crazy thing is the users ramped up so aggressively, and they ramped up aggressively because the industry was transforming underneath them too aggressively. So they got a lot more aggressive than those companies have ever been before, Paramount, formerly Viacom, and Disney, et cetera. And those various streams did two things that really hurt fundamentally Netflix's business model. First, they pulled the type of content that they were and just did not re-up the contracts that they had with Netflix, such that Netflix had to figure out what it was going to do for content. Now, in fairness, this is the one objective that they had announced like in years previous that was undergoing currently. But they additionally just created a lot more around their streaming businesses, and then really started to eat incrementally Netflix's lunch. And so now they have put the consumer as an industry in the conundrum of which do I keep, which do I not? For a lot of folks that are of a certain income level, it's not a big deal to pay for multiple. Then the cable provider is the one that suffers, right? So that's Comcast. But in a lot of cases, that's a different story. Like some people can pay for cable, but they can't pay for all this other stuff. Some people can pay for this. They have to choose between which one is interesting to them. So we don't know what's actually going to happen. I think, and they really had no strategy on the last earnings call. I've not been bullish or bearish Netflix for a while, because I do think that they have some very innovative people there. But at the same time, I was expecting a very different call than what we received. This last call, it sounded like the executives, with all due respect, I've listened to, their calls and they're usually a certain way. And this last one, with all due respect to the management team, it sounded like they were exhausted. And most of the way that they spoke about their strategy seemed like they were still in brainstorming mode, rather than that, you usually get this executive that comes out and says, this is how we're going to address it. This is what you'd expect. This is what we should see in earnings. So I just don't know that call, they can't have another one of those calls, because the stock will either at minimum, it'll trade sideways, but it could actually get clobbered again, because you have revision adjustments associated with it, and not the least of which come from massive CapEx spend. But they just can't have another call like that. And I'm not sure that they're going to have something significantly better if they're just only in talks with ad supported stuff. If they have like a real strategy and starting to see progress that they can announce and expectations associated with earnings, different story. So that's how I'm thinking about it. Hopefully that's helpful, Rich.
No, that's good. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to buy a couple just so that you're not totally left behind, if you buy the leaps, just buy them slowly and in small size for now.
Well, I'd actually, if I do that, I would probably use spreads to offset any, because I'm looking at the charts, and if it looks like it's going to reverse, I just simply sell some calls against it. But I just think from a long-term perspective, I mean, unless they're going to go out of business, the price is back to 5 years ago. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I saw the same chart. I can't figure out what their model is going to be in this new area. And I can see, if for me, sometimes it's a relative thing. So relative to some of the growth in the other streamers, which actually I think all of them kind of have to fight it out right now. Like Paramount's actually done a decent job, better than people expect. But the problem, yeah, I totally agree with that. I guess the challenge for Paramount is just they still have to get rid of the core business and wind it down as they wind up the new business. So what the valuation should be therein is a little bit like difficult. So I just monitor the space, because I do think that if I'm like, which one has the probability to report me a more interesting quarter? I like Paramount slightly better than the others, but I've always liked Paramount slightly better. So I know I'm biased. So you know what I mean? Netflix, I was just too disappointed this last quarter to touch it.
Yeah, and I have every streaming service known to man. But if I had to choose one, I mean, and I watch all of them, it would really come down to Hulu or Netflix.
Yeah.
I mean, those would be my choices. And it would be a tough choice, because Hulu, that way I don't have to have cable TV, right? I can watch the next day. But Netflix has so many options for movies and programming. It's just Netflix, I think, has better content.
Yeah.
Well, let me rephrase that. They have more content and often it's competitive.
Yeah. I think the dog that doesn't ever get any love and discussion is actually Google. I know people will make fun of me for that, but like honestly, YouTube, I mean, it doesn't have nearly the programming it could have. And I think that I mean, like I wonder about what the team's thoughts are, and they never really discussed it. But if Google decided to make a serious push in this particular environment, they could be like a dog in this fight that no one has ever considered. Do you know what I'm saying?
I agree with that fully. Yeah,
Yeah, but no one's ever talked
YouTube is
about it.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and it's streaming on every television. It's kind of like chilling. It has both, like, you know, I don't need to describe YouTube to the public. The public knows YouTube. The public has watched shows on YouTube that no longer exist elsewhere. The public's not confused. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's the one that I always am fascinated that no one talks about. And I think that's because the analyst that covers Google is not the same analyst that covers all the other media companies. But at 19 times, Google's actually the cheapest by a lot within the media space. I'm just saying, you know, but you know, Google's trading dynamic is something different, Rich. And I know you know that because you trade Google all the time. So like, okay, the other two, just to briefly, Elon, I feel like somebody, I mean, I sometimes feel like he's that guy that every other day, depending on how the sun shines, wakes up. And some days he wakes up and he tweets something amazingly happy. And other days the world is like not his friend. Do you know what I mean? And so like this, you know, it's not surprising that that specifically the factories he's referring to are the ones in Germany and the ones in Asia. And it's all of the macro that we know and love every day that allows me to have at least something to talk about. So there's that. And yeah, that one is gonna probably, like every other day until he finally reports, it's gonna be what it is, even though I think Tesla is still a long-term winner. I saw an article up on the CNBC this morning on a smaller startup that's doing taxi-less driving. So, and they have started beta testing it, but I can't tell if that's just a really fancy video or if that's really, I need to understand. It's called Cruise. I need to actually see the number of users because, you know, there's that. And then the last thing is that they, some of the giants ad revenues, there's some article in the journal about that. China is important, not just companies that we care about, Baba, et cetera, that give you kind of a weather vane on how China's going, even more so than the numbers that come out of the Chinese government, but also because they are kind of an important pillar, if you will, to global stability. You know, China has a huge consumer market. China imports a ton of raw materials and food. And I think that's part of the reason why everybody keeps trying to short the metals and short this, short some of the basic materials complex that feeds into Asia, which is quite a lot. Company by company, you kind of have to take a look to be fair. But that news is out there as well. And that's really all I have prepared. I don't know if there's anything that you guys have the specific questions completely separate from all that. What's going on, guys?
Hey, May, good morning.
Good morning, David.
Have you looked at Meta lately?
You know,
Formerly
okay.
known as Facebook.
Yeah, no, I got you. And it's a great question because I keep staring at it for obvious reasons, because I am, as you guys know, at the New York NFT conference.
Right.
And it's interesting because the one company that is not here is Facebook so much, or maybe they are, maybe it's their division. I just haven't seen their booth yet, or maybe they're presenting, but they're not like front and center relative to the other players within the space. And it's not that NFTs has to be their thing, but it's just, I think that when I talk to folks here that are across the range of Web3 businesses that also link to NFT, when they talk about, like, I feel like they all, and I felt this way too when I was in Austin, that they feel like Facebook is the anti whatever it is they're trying to do. And I didn't appreciate fully that, even though I do think it's the right call for them to try to evolve into it. There's something that's going on with the way that the space itself feels about Facebook. And I know you and I have talked about the fact that they're not a beloved company to work for in certain ways, although surely everybody there appreciates the resume benefits of working at the company. But it's the fundamental implementation that they're doing apparently irritates a lot of the Web3 community, from developer to user base to artists, et cetera. So it's just something I need to understand better before I can really get behind what Meta is doing, because quite frankly, they're rediverting all their funding to it. So if they're rediverting all their funding to it, which I think is the right call, but they're also alienating somehow the entire community, that's not an ideal use of capital. So I kind of need to, I just want to understand that a lot better before I start really talking about the benefits of it here at these levels.
Yeah, that's a good point, because he in his interview with Kramer yesterday, he was he was talking about ads, and to me the metaverse needs to, I mean, the revenue is going to come from ads from creators.
Yes. Well, yeah, the advertisers. Yeah. I mean, there is no marketing. Like, I will say this, the first obvious and easiest mover within the space is absolutely any company that's trying to market into a broader base. Now, I think there's a lot of nuance to that, because it really depends on the type of marketing and the type of user interface that Facebook customers are accustomed to versus, say, TikTok or Instagram, or really literally anything else the kids are using these days, like Twitch, et cetera, and how monetizable that is. So, Facebook Live does have a particular crowd that's a little bit older and so you won't see as many, like, given some of what's happening on Twitch and things like that, and you compare it to Facebook, it's not really comparable. So let me give you an example on things like Twitch. Some of the amazing things that I've seen even at this conference and have heard about is, you have artists on there that have their own NFT, and they've got some NFT provider that, and a whole series of folks that are, building that experience up for them. And so it's like the t-shirt, whereas you would have gone to a concert to buy a t-shirt, you'd buy the NFT on that website. Well, it turns out that that's the young users are all about that, but people like older users have like a mixed understanding of how to do that, or why they would do that. So it's a little bit of a different animal as to their ability to train the users, as well as the adoption rate versus some of the younger technologies that are out there. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, Facebook's older people, so he's got to get a younger demographic somehow, because I don't think older people are going to get into this.
Yeah, I think it's a younger demographic, or he's got to educate the users on why they would care about buying an NFT. Like, I do think that it's really hard to conceptualize preferring a virtual shirt, because you actually have an avatar that you would put it on to an older audience versus explaining that to someone who's like 12. I'm sure, like, Dietrich, I'm sure your daughter knows everything about that and could actually school the four of us if you put her on.
People like me would think that's really stupid.
I know, but I'm telling you, Dietrich's laughing because he agrees, I'm sure, right? Give me a thumbs up if that's true. I know you always like to say silent on me. Yeah, exactly. It's like, Daddy, can I have your credit card? I want to buy this really random thing. Like, okay, were you good? It's true. So that is actually what's happening. And that's what I want to really better understand effectively before I come out and think about Facebook as a buy, given how much capital they are diverting from other aspects of their business to try to build this out. Any other questions?
But the NFT people, they're going to have to use a platform, right?
Yeah.
Meta is the platform, correct?
Hard to say.
Maybe that's why it changed the name. I mean,
there are choices. There are lots of choices.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. It's the number of new platform communities. So there's all the ones that your kids might be using, and then there are all the ones that your kids aren't telling you that they're using. And then there's a bunch that you just don't even know about because you have to be such an insider. And it's quite crazy. And then there's the games themselves. Like, people, one of the amazing, and I'll have to get a chart or something, one of the amazing just factoids that I'm learning about has to do with the growth of the gaming business, period. It is actually eclipsing other forms of media quickly, and it's not just because people stayed in and all revenue across all forms of media increased. No, it's actually because that's the trend. That's the way people are behaving to each other. And remember, gaming isn't always shooting and killing or racing cars. It can be any number of things. So the socialization, the gamification of socialization, let me say it that way, is real. And it's, growing as a way that people communicate socially.
So David, as an example, Microsoft is building a platform.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the
Like, I
Meta,
think actually for all the
Meta has
haters,
a lot to prove.
yeah, I mean, it's like, it's really fascinating. That's why I do think he's making the right call strategically, period. So that question, all the haters that think he's doing the wrong thing, I don't agree with he's doing the wrong thing, but doing the right thing for your company and whether or not we as equity holders are going in at the right time, they're two kind of different questions. And the latter is harder for me to just see very clearly. I can't yet get my mind around it. And part of that is a learning curve for me of really appreciating fully where Meta sits within this bigger space that they're trying to invest into. Now, I love that you mentioned Microsoft, Rich, because you know, I have a lot of haters on this, by the way, as you guys all know. The purchase of Activision to me was front and center to that. You know what I mean? Because Activision, yeah. So I think that was probably, if they can push that through, which I think they should, that's going to be like a fantastic boon, because Xbox is a wonderful piece of business, which they now are getting rid of the hardware, which is a big deal in my opinion, because it moves them in a particular way. And you can almost see that I see that as a huge positive indicator that they are going to blend these two businesses together. If they don't blend the games in a particular way, they will 100% have the optionality to do the blending of the headcount, which they need, you know, which everyone needs, quite frankly. That headcount is very hard to obtain in a kind of consistent manner at the talent level that Activision has it at. So yeah.
Can I get your thoughts on something completely different? And maybe you didn't look at this, but I don't know.
I'll tell you if I don't know. You know, I never BS. If I know, I know. If I don't, I'll just tell you.
Accenture, they reported this morning.
Oh, I didn't see that. You're right. They're an early reporter. Let me take a look. I haven't looked at their reporting yet. What did you see?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're down considerably. And
okay, yeah, let me take a look.
Curious as to whether or not, I mean, they're down, well, they're not down that much. They're only down a little over 2%, but.
Let me take a look. They'd actually had a series of great quarters because there's just so much change and transformation happening that the consulting businesses in general and every company are just doing
So it
fantastic.
looks like they missed their estimates.
Yeah, let me take a look and see where exactly they missed it. I mean, here's the thing. I do think that there is, for a while, I was like, there's no recession. And then part of me is like, oh, I don't know. Well, actually, I think officially I'm like, I don't know, 50-50 odds. But I will say that given some of the things that I've been seeing and sniffing around about, I don't think the GDP number is going to come in as high as expected. And so I wouldn't be like shocked out of my mind if it was a negative net post, such that we got the 2 quarters that would traditionally indicate the definition of recession. And I do think, I mean, like, come on, anyone that has a business or anything can feel a bit of slowdown, except possibly in this crypto gaming space, mostly in the NFT world. Funding is a big issue. Funding slowdown because of the deflation of the way in which, you know, if Ethereum and Bitcoin deflate, it is a massive deflationary effect on that industry as well. Nonetheless, there was just so much value created in that industry that it's not, you know, it's having an effect, but it's not slowing it in any kind of meaningful way, because I do think Web3 is where the future is going, and people are just trying to move as fast as they can and take advantage of any kind of slowdown to grab solid and brilliant headcount.
So here's what, I mean, this is really weird, right? So it says mixed results, but it looks like they beat and then they raised their guidance. So I don't understand.
I have to read it. Let me read it and understand, because if they beat and raise their guidance, it's probably, it could be like people just trading it in front of the call. So does it say what time? Let me look. What time is their call at?
I don't know what time the call is.
I'll take a look. Don't worry about it. Okay, so I'll definitely add that to my list, because they do absolutely give. Oh, no, that's not very helpful. Sorry, thought I had it for a second. Okay, they haven't listed their call yet, so maybe they haven't had the call yet. Sometimes the release comes out first, and then the call.
Yeah, so their EPS 279, which beat 274. Sales were 16.2, beat 15.35. And then they raised their sales guidance by, they didn't say what percentage, just says raises sales guidance. Growth to be between 25.5, 25.6%. So,
Yeah, this sounds like it
That's-
might be a post earnings puke out, which sometimes happens.
all
know.
right, so I may put that on, I may put that on the list for this morning then. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so it's, yeah, so, oh, they have had their call, they just haven't done the replay yet. Okay, I'll have a listen and some comments, but I will not unfortunately have my show tomorrow because I will be flying to Sedona, one of my favorite places on the earth. And so, but we'll start again on Monday at 1:00. I know you like this time better, but Rich, it's a possibility that we do it at this time now in the future, but I have to convince Dave, who's already an early riser, to feel comfortable that he's going to be having coffee with all of us. All right. Bye, guys. Have an awesome day. Good luck in
One
trading.
more question, one more
Oh,
question.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, two
Instagram.
more questions if you want. What's that?
Instagram is a pretty young demographic, right?
It's a little bit younger, but technically, if we were to go to Dietrich's kid and be like, what do you think of Instagram? I think they know it. They know how to use it, but it's not their deal necessarily. It's not their deal, but it's like.
So he's gonna have to buy demographics somehow.
I don't know if he's gonna have to buy demographic or he's just gonna have to create cool,
Create cool, right?
That's really what that's really what we're doing, right? They're in the business of creating cool. It is. I mean, we all know,
There's nothing cool. There's nothing cool about him.
You'd be surprised. The young folks today, what they think is cool is nothing like our generations, respectively. We've got kind of a variation of ages here. I know a variation. Our generation, like sort of thing. Dietrich's younger than I am. Okay, let's say that way. I'm in a different generation from Dietrich. We'll say it that way. But like what they think is cool is not the same as what we think is cool in any way, shape, or form. And creating that cool factor is, they're just so different. They're like little aliens, but you got to love them because they're a family, right? You know what I'm saying?
But it's a huge, I mean, if you can market to them, that's where your future is. That's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, May.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, May.